David Chen sat in his small office on Europa Station, staring at the message on his screen for the 10th time. 3 years. 3 long, exhausting years of trying to understand the Zephyrians. And finally, it had worked. The trade agreement was signed. Earth would get access to their advanced technology, and the Zephyrians would receive the rare minerals they needed from human colonies. He should have felt proud. His colleagues were celebrating in the station's main hall, their laughter echoing through the metal corridors. But David felt empty. The work had consumed everything: his sleep, his social life, even his relationship with his family back on Earth. He hadn't spoken to his sister in months. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Chen, please report to Director Martinez's office immediately." David straightened his wrinkled shirt and walked through the station's bright white hallways. Europa Station was humanity's crown jewel, built inside the ice moon's surface with artificial gravity and recycled air. But after 3 years, it felt more like a fancy prison to him. Director Martinez was a short, energetic woman who never seemed to sleep. Her office walls were covered with photos of successful diplomatic missions, and David could already see where his picture would go. She was practically bouncing in her chair when he entered. "David, my boy, you've done it. The Zephyrian Council wants to honor you personally. This is unprecedented." She gestured wildly with her hands. "Do you know what this means for Earth? For our expansion program? For your career?" David nodded politely, though he honestly didn't care much about his career anymore. "What kind of honor, Director? That's the beautiful part. They want to give you a life companion, one of their own people. It's the highest honor in their culture, reserved only for those who've earned their deepest respect." The words hit David like cold water. A what now? A wife, essentially. From their species. Can you imagine? The first human-Zephyrian union in history. The scientific opportunities alone. Martinez continued talking, but David's mind went blank. He had spent years learning about Zephyrian culture. He knew their customs, their social structures, their belief systems. And yes, he knew about their practice of arranged partnerships for diplomatic purposes. But he never imagined it would involve him. "Director, I don't think I can accept this." Martinez stopped mid-sentence. Her expression changed from excitement to concern. "David, you do understand what refusing would mean? We're talking about insulting an entire civilization. Everything we've worked for could crumble." David's stomach dropped. He thought about all the people counting on this agreement. The miners on Titan who needed Zephyrian medical technology. The research teams waiting for their advanced materials. The thousands of colonists whose lives would improve because of this partnership. "But I don't even know her. I've never met her. How can I marry someone I don't know who isn't even—" He stopped himself before saying, "human." That wouldn't sound good. "David, listen to me." Martinez leaned forward, her voice becoming gentle. "I know this is overwhelming. But think about it, you're the only human who truly understands their culture. If anyone can make this work, it's you. And who knows? Maybe you'll find something special." David wanted to laugh, but it came out as a weak cough instead. Something special? With a 7-foot-tall alien whose skin glowed in the dark? Whose people communicated through musical tones and had customs he was still trying to understand? 2 days later, Elder Vexhai arrived at the station. The Zephyrian diplomat was tall and graceful, with silver skin that shimmered under the station's lights. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes mixed with whale songs, and the translation device turned it into formal, stilted English. "The one called Lyra Silthanis has accepted this sacred duty," Vexhai announced during the formal meeting. "She is a harmony weaver, keeper of deep currents, reader of the flowing streams that connect all consciousness." David nodded as if those titles made perfect sense, though he had no idea what any of them meant. He had studied Zephyrian job descriptions for years, but their society was so different from human culture that many concepts simply didn't translate well. "She is prepared for this union through meditation and study of your human ways," Vexhai continued. The ceremony will take place in 7 of your day cycles. 7 days. David felt like he was drowning. After the meeting, he walked to the station's observation deck, where a massive window showed Europa's icy surface and Jupiter's storms swirling in the distance. Other station personnel walked by, patting his shoulder and congratulating him. They saw this as a victory, a triumph for human diplomacy. But David felt like a chess piece being moved around a board by forces much larger than himself. He thought about his ex-girlfriend Kate, who had broken up with him 2 years ago because his work consumed his entire life. "You care more about aliens than you do about actual people," she had said. Now, ironically, he was going to marry an alien. That night, David couldn't sleep. He paced around his small quarters, looking at the few personal items he had brought from Earth. A photo of his family, some old books, a plant his mother had given him that somehow survived in the station's artificial environment. He picked up his communication device and almost called his sister, but what would he say? "Hey, remember how you always said I'd never find anyone? Well, funny story." He put the device down. The next morning brought another message from Earth. His parents had seen the news broadcasts about the historic union. His mother's message was full of excitement and worry. "David, sweetheart, we're so proud of you, but are you sure about this? We just want you to be happy." His father's message was shorter. "Son, duty is important, but don't forget to live your own life too." David stared at these messages for a long time. His own life. When was the last time he had lived for himself instead of for his work? For Earth, for diplomatic relations, for everyone else's expectations. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had become an expert in alien culture, had learned to communicate with beings from another world, had dedicated his life to building bridges between species, but he had never learned how to build a bridge to his own happiness. As the days passed, David found himself researching everything he could about Zephyrian partnership customs. Their marriages weren't like human marriages. They were based on mental and spiritual compatibility rather than romantic love. Partners were expected to help each other grow and find harmony with the universe around them. It sounded beautiful in theory, but David wondered how it would work in practice. Could he find harmony with someone he couldn't even have a real conversation with? Could he help someone grow when he felt so lost himself? The station's social coordinator, Mrs. Thompson, tried to help him prepare. She was a kind elderly woman who had been managing diplomatic events for decades. "You know, dear," she said while they planned the ceremony, "some of the best partnerships start as friendships. Maybe that's all this needs to be at first." David appreciated her optimism, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Or maybe, just maybe, he was about to discover something he never knew he was looking for. 3 days before the ceremony, he received a final message from the Zephyrian Council. Lyra Silthanis would arrive tomorrow. She was described as intelligent, dedicated, and willing to learn human customs. The message included a photo, or rather a holographic image that showed a tall, graceful figure with silver skin and large, dark eyes that seemed to hold depths of wisdom and sadness. David stared at the image for a long time, trying to imagine what she might be thinking, what she might be feeling about this arrangement. Was she as nervous as he was? Was she also wondering if she was making a terrible mistake? For the first time since this whole situation began, David realized he wasn't the only one whose life was being turned upside down. Somewhere out there, this Lyra person was probably having her own sleepless nights, her own doubts, her own fears about marrying a complete stranger from another species. Maybe, he thought, they could figure it out together. Maybe being confused and scared didn't have to be something he faced alone. The next morning, David woke up with a strange sense of calm. He still didn't know what was going to happen, still didn't know if this would work out. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was about to step into something completely new, something that belonged entirely to him, and not to Earth's diplomatic corps or anyone else's expectations. His life was about to change forever. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a terrible thing. The transport ship arrived exactly on schedule. David stood in the docking bay wearing his best formal uniform, feeling like his heart might jump out of his chest. Director Martinez stood beside him, along with several other diplomats and station officials. Everyone looked excited except David, who felt like he might throw up. "Remember, this is a historic moment," Martinez whispered. "Smile, be respectful, and try to look happy." David nodded, though happy was the last thing he felt. The docking bay doors opened with a soft hiss, and suddenly she was there. Lyra Silthanis was even more impressive in person than in the holographic image. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, moving with a fluid grace that made David feel clumsy just watching her. Her skin had a silver-white color that seemed to glow softly under the station's lights, and her eyes were large, dark, and completely unreadable. She wore a flowing garment that looked like liquid metal, and when she walked, it made no sound at all. David had studied Zephyrian customs for years, but seeing one of them in person was still overwhelming. "Welcome to Europa Station," Martinez said, stepping forward with a big smile. The translation device around her neck turned her words into the musical tones of Zephyrian language. Lyra responded with a series of melodic sounds that the device translated as, "I am honored to be received with such ceremony. I bring greetings from the Council of Harmony." David noticed that even through the translation, her voice had a quality that seemed to vibrate through his bones. It was beautiful and strange at the same time. "This is David Chen," Martinez said, gesturing toward him. "Your intended partner." David stepped forward, not sure if he should bow, shake hands, or just stand there. Lyra looked at him with those dark eyes, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then she performed a graceful gesture with her hands that David recognized as a formal Zephyrian greeting. He tried to copy the gesture, but his hands felt clumsy and wrong. Lyra's expression didn't change, but David thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Amusement? Pity? He couldn't tell. "I am honored to meet you," David said, his voice coming out smaller than he intended. The translation device turned his words into Zephyrian tones, but he was sure something was lost in the process. "The honor is mine," Lyra replied through the translator. "I look forward to learning about your ways." The formal introductions continued for another hour. David watched Lyra interact with the other station officials, noticing how she seemed to study everything around her. Her eyes moved constantly, taking in the metal walls, the artificial lighting, the humans bustling about their business. When the ceremonies were finally over, David found himself alone with Lyra in the diplomatic quarters that had been prepared for them. The silence was awkward and heavy. "So," David said, then immediately realized he had no idea what to say next. "How was your trip?" Lyra tilted her head slightly, a gesture that seemed curious. "The journey was educational. Your space vessels are very different from ours." "Different how?" David asked, genuinely interested despite his nervousness. "Your ships are built for efficiency. Ours are built for harmony with the cosmic flows." She paused, then added, "I am not sure how to explain it in your language." David nodded. He had encountered this problem many times in his translation work. Some concepts simply didn't exist in both cultures. They sat in silence for a while, both of them clearly uncomfortable. David noticed that Lyra's skin seemed to pulse with very faint colors, soft blues and silvers that came and went like gentle waves. He wondered if it meant something or if it was just how Zephyrian skin worked. "Are you nervous about this?" David asked suddenly, then immediately regretted it. What if that was an insulting question? But Lyra's expression seemed to soften, slightly. "Yes," she said simply. "Are you?" Terrified, David admitted, then laughed nervously. "I mean, this is all new to me. I've never been married to anyone, let alone someone from another world." "I have never been partnered either," Lyra said. "Among my people, I was considered too focused on my studies to be a good partner." David looked at her with surprise. "What did you study?" "The deep currents, the flows of emotion and thought that connect all living beings. It is what you might call psychology, but deeper than that." "That sounds fascinating," David said, and meant it. Is that why they call you a harmony weaver? For the first time, Lyra's expression became animated. Yes. I can sense the emotional currents around me, the fear, the joy, the confusion. Right now I can feel your nervousness, but also your curiosity, and your kindness. David felt his cheeks turn red. You can feel what I'm feeling? Not exactly. More like I can sense the emotional weather around you. The way you might sense if someone is happy or sad, but more precisely. What do you sense from me right now? David asked, not sure if he really wanted to know. Lyra was quiet for a moment, her skin pulsing with gentle blues. Confusion, fear, but also hope. You are trying very hard to be kind, even though you are uncomfortable. David laughed, and it sounded more natural this time. That's pretty accurate. Their second meeting went better. David had spent the night reading everything he could find about Zephyrian culture, and Lyra had apparently done the same about humans. They tried to have a real conversation, but the translation device made everything sound formal and strange. Your people eat many different foods, Lyra observed, looking at the meal David had ordered from the station's cafeteria. Yes, we're pretty diverse in our tastes, David said, then realized that might not translate well. We like variety. My people consume mostly energy directly from light and minerals, but I have been studying human nutrition in preparation for this assignment. Assignment? David asked, then wished he hadn't. It sounded so cold, so businesslike. Lyra's skin flickered with what looked like embarrassment. I apologize. That was not the correct word. This partnership, this joining of lives. It's okay, David said quickly. I know this is strange, for both of us. They continued eating in silence, but it felt less awkward than before. David found himself watching the way Lyra moved, the way her expressions changed subtly, the way her skin seemed to reflect her emotions. She was beautiful, but in a way that was completely alien to him. On their third meeting, disaster struck. The translation device malfunctioned halfway through their conversation, leaving them sitting across from each other with no way to communicate. David tried gesturing, but that just made Lyra look confused. She tried speaking in English, but her vocal cords weren't designed for human languages, and the sounds came out all wrong. They sat in frustrated silence for several minutes. Then Lyra did something unexpected. She started humming. The sound was unlike anything David had ever heard. It was low and melodic, with harmonics that seemed to resonate in his chest. It wasn't exactly music, but it wasn't just noise either. It was something in between, something that felt like it carried meaning even though he couldn't understand it. David found himself relaxing as he listened. The tune was sad but also hopeful, like a lullaby for adults. When Lyra finished, she looked at him with a question in her eyes. That was beautiful, David said, even though he knew she couldn't understand him. But something in his tone must have gotten through because her skin pulsed with warm gold colors. Then David did something he never would have expected. He started humming, too. It was just a simple tune his mother used to sing to him. But Lyra listened with complete attention. When he finished, she hummed again, this time incorporating some of the notes from his melody. They spent the next hour humming back and forth, creating something together without words. It wasn't conversation exactly, but it was communication. For the first time since this whole situation began, David felt like they were actually connecting. When the maintenance crew finally fixed the translation device, neither David nor Lyra seemed in a hurry to start talking again. They had found something that worked better than words, at least for now. I think, David said finally, we might actually figure this out. Lyra's skin pulsed with gentle blues and golds. Perhaps we will, she agreed. Perhaps we will. That night, David lay in his bed thinking about the sound of Lyra's humming. For the first time since she arrived, he wasn't dreading the wedding ceremony. He was actually curious about what might happen next. Maybe, he thought, this wouldn't be so terrible after all. Maybe they could build something together even if it wasn't what either of them had originally planned. The thought was scary and exciting at the same time, but mostly it felt like hope. 1 month after the wedding ceremony, David woke up to the sound of Lyra moving around their shared living space. The ceremony had been beautiful, but strange, a mix of human and Zephyrian traditions that left everyone confused but smiling. Now, they were actually living together, and it was nothing like David had expected. He found Lyra standing by the large window in their main room, her skin glowing with soft blue patterns. She did this every morning, just standing there looking out at the stars. David had learned not to interrupt her during these moments. "Good morning," he said quietly when she finally turned around. "Good morning, David," she replied in her careful English. Over the past month she had been learning his language, and he had been learning hers. It was slow work, but better than relying on the translation device all the time. "How did you sleep?" David asked, though he knew the answer. Zephyrians didn't sleep the way humans did. They went into a kind of meditative state that recharged their energy. "I rested well," Lyra said, then paused. "But I sensed disturbance in the station last night. Many people were anxious." This was something David was still getting used to. Lyra could feel emotions from other people, even through walls and across distances. At first it had made him uncomfortable, knowing she could sense his feelings. But now he found it fascinating. "There was a problem with the mining operation on Sector 7, David explained. "Some of the workers got trapped in a cave-in. They're all safe now, but it scared everyone." Lyra nodded slowly. "I felt their fear. It was like dark waves, washing through the station." David made coffee for himself and prepared Lyra's morning energy drink, a mixture of minerals and light-enhanced water that helped her stay healthy in the station's artificial environment. These small routines had become comfortable over the past weeks. "Does it hurt?" David asked. "Feeling everyone's emotions all the time?" Lyra considered this while sipping her drink. "Sometimes. When there is much pain or anger, it can be overwhelming. But also, I feel the good emotions too. The joy when someone receives a message from home. The satisfaction when someone completes difficult work. The love between partners." She looked at David when she said this last part, and he felt his cheeks warm up. Their relationship was still new and strange, but there were moments when he caught glimpses of something deeper. "What do you feel from me?" David asked, not for the first time. "Curiosity," Lyra said immediately. "Always curiosity. You want to understand everything around you. And kindness. You try very hard to make me comfortable, even when you are not comfortable yourself." David smiled. "You're pretty easy to read too, you know. Not because of any special abilities, just because you're honest about everything." That afternoon, David was working in his office when the station's emergency alarm went off. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and the computer voice announced, "Solar flare detected. All personnel report to emergency stations." Solar flares were dangerous for space stations. They could knock out power, damage equipment, and hurt people if they weren't properly shielded. David had been through the drills, but this was the first real emergency since Lyra arrived. He ran to their quarters to find Lyra, but she wasn't there. Panic started to build in his chest as he searched the station. Where would she go during an emergency? Did she even understand what was happening? He found her in the station's central hub, surrounded by a crowd of frightened people. But something was wrong with the scene. The people should have been panicking, running around, shouting. Instead, they were calm. Too calm. "Lyra," David called out, pushing through the crowd. She looked up at him, and he could see the strain on her face. Her skin was pulsing with rapid silver patterns, and she looked exhausted. "David," she said, her voice weak, "I am trying to help, but there are so many people." David understood immediately. Lyra was using her abilities to keep everyone calm, absorbing their fear and panic into herself. But it was too much for her to handle. "You need to stop," David said, taking her hand. "You're going to hurt yourself." "But they are so afraid," Lyra protested. "Children are crying. Adults are preparing for death. I can make it better." "Not like this," David said firmly. "Come with me," He led her to the emergency control center, where Director Martinez was coordinating the response. The room was chaos, people shouting orders, computers beeping warnings, technicians running around with tools and equipment. "David, thank goodness," Martinez said when she saw them. "We need all hands on deck. The solar flare is going to hit in 30 minutes. "I can help," David said, "but Lyra needs to help too, in her own way." Martinez looked confused, but David didn't have time to explain. He turned to Lyra. "Don't try to absorb everyone's emotions," he said. "Instead, help them focus. Help them work together." Lyra nodded, understanding immediately. Instead of taking away people's fear, she began to channel it into productive action. The chaotic energy in the room shifted, becoming more organized and purposeful. David coordinated the evacuation of non-essential personnel, while Lyra helped keep everyone calm and focused. They worked together like they had been partners for years, each one supporting the other. When the solar flare hit, most of the station's systems went down. Emergency power kicked in, but it was dim and limited. People huddled in the safe areas, waiting for the danger to pass. David and Lyra sat together in one of the emergency shelters, surrounded by families with children. The kids were scared, and their parents were trying to stay brave. "Tell us about your home world," one of the children asked Lyra. Lyra looked surprised, then smiled. She began to describe the crystal cities of her people, the floating gardens, the light streams that connected everything. Her voice was gentle and musical, and soon all the children were listening with wide eyes. As she spoke, David watched the adults relax too. Parents stopped looking so worried. Even the station personnel seemed less tense. "You're amazing," David whispered to Lyra during a quiet moment. "We are amazing," she corrected. "You helped me understand how to use my abilities better. Together we made a difference." After the emergency was over and the station's systems were back online, David and Lyra walked back to their quarters. The corridors were quiet now, but David could feel something had changed between them. "I was scared today," David admitted. "Not just of the solar flare, but of losing you. I realized that somewhere along the way you became important to me." Lyra stopped walking and looked at him. Her skin was glowing with warm gold patterns. "I have been afraid too. Afraid that I would never fit into your world. But today, I felt like I belonged somewhere for the first time since I arrived." "You belong with me," David said, and he meant it completely. That night they sat together on their small couch, not talking much but comfortable in each other's presence. David was reading a book about Zephyrian poetry, trying to understand the complex rhythms and meanings. Lyra was working on a translation of human literature into her native language. "David," Lyra said suddenly, "what is love?" David looked up from his book, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I understand the concept intellectually, but I want to know what it feels like. Is it different from partnership? From respect? From friendship?" David thought about this carefully. Love is all of those things, but more. It's when someone becomes part of your world so completely that you can't imagine life without them. It's when their happiness becomes as important as your own. Lyra nodded slowly. "I think I am beginning to understand." "Are you?" David asked, his heart beating faster. "Yes," Lyra said, her skin pulsing with gentle blues and golds. "I think I am learning to love you, David Chen." David smiled, feeling warmth spread through his chest. "I think I'm learning to love you too, Lyra." It wasn't the passionate romance of movies or books. It was something quieter, deeper, built on understanding and shared experience. But it was real, and it was theirs. Outside their window, the stars continued their ancient dance, and two beings from different worlds continued learning what it meant to build a life together. 6 months into their marriage, David thought life was finally settling into a comfortable rhythm. He and Lyra had found their balance, learning each other's habits and building something that felt real. But that morning, everything changed. Director Martinez called David into her office with an expression he'd never seen before. She looked excited and worried at the same time, which was never a good sign. "David, we have a situation," she said, closing the door behind him. "Earth Command wants to expand our operations. They're impressed with how well the partnership is working." "That's good news, right?" David asked, though something in her tone made him nervous. "They want more than trade agreements now. They want territorial partnerships, shared colonies, and they want you to use your special relationship with Lyra to gather information about Zephyrian defense systems." David felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. "You want me to spy on my wife?" "It's not spying," Martinez said quickly. "It's intelligence gathering. We need to know their capabilities if we're going to be true partners." "No," David said immediately. "Absolutely not." Martinez's expression hardened. "David, this isn't a request. This is a direct order from Earth Command." "Then Earth Command can find someone else to do their dirty work," David replied, standing up to leave. "Sit down," Martinez said sharply. "Do you understand what you're saying? You're refusing a direct order. This could end your career, your security clearance, everything you've worked for." David looked at her for a long moment. "Director, 6 months ago that threat might have scared me, but I've learned something about what's actually important in life." He walked out of her office knowing he'd probably just destroyed his future with the diplomatic corps, but he couldn't bring himself to care. When he got home, Lyra took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. Her skin immediately shifted to concerned blue patterns. "What has happened?" she asked, setting down the human history book she'd been reading. David told her everything. As he spoke, Lyra's skin grew darker, the blues becoming deeper and more turbulent. "They want you to betray me," she said quietly when he finished. "They want me to betray us," David corrected. "But I won't do it." Lyra was quiet for a long time, her skin pulsing with complex patterns David was still learning to read. Finally, she spoke. "I must tell you something, David. My people are having similar discussions." David's heart sank. "What do you mean?" "The Conservative Council has been questioning our bond. They say I'm becoming too human, that I'm losing touch with the deep currents of our people." Lyra's voice was steady, but David could see the pain in her eyes. "They have summoned me home." "When?" David asked, dreading the answer. "Tomorrow." The next 18 hours were a blur of preparations and difficult conversations. David insisted on coming with Lyra to the Zephyrian homeworld, even though humans had never been allowed there before. "It could be dangerous," Lyra warned. "The atmosphere is different. The gravity is lighter, and some of my people are not welcoming to outsiders." "I don't care," David said. "We're partners. We face this together." The journey to the Zephyrian homeworld took 3 days on their fastest diplomatic ship. David spent the time learning everything he could about Zephyrian law and customs, while Lyra taught him the formal phrases he would need if he was allowed to speak before the council. "Remember," she said as they practiced, "do not show anger, even if they insult you. Among my people, emotional control is highly valued." "What if they insult you?" David asked. Lyra smiled sadly. "Then you must control your anger for both of us." The Zephyrian homeworld was unlike anything David had imagined. Crystal cities rose from landscapes that seemed to glow with their own inner light. The buildings curved and flowed like living things, and streams of pure energy connected different parts of the cities like glowing rivers. But David barely had time to appreciate the beauty. They were immediately taken to the council chambers, a vast crystalline hall where 12 Zephyrian elders sat in a circle of floating platforms. The trial began immediately. Elder Kethavar, the most conservative member of the council, spoke first. "Lyra, Silthanis, you stand accused of losing your connection to the deep currents. You have been contaminated by human emotions and human ways of thinking." David wanted to object, but Lyra had warned him to stay silent unless directly addressed. "I have not lost my connection," Lyra replied calmly. "I have expanded it. Through my bond with David, I have learned to sense new kinds of harmony." "Harmony with aliens is not true harmony," Kethavar said dismissively. "It is confusion. It is weakness." For 2 hours, the elders questioned Lyra about her abilities, her loyalties, and her commitment to Zephyrian values. Through it all, she remained calm and dignified, answering each question with patience. Finally, Elder Vexai, who had arranged the original marriage, spoke to David. "Human David Chen, you have not spoken. Do you have nothing to say in defense of this bond?" David stood up, his heart racing. This was his moment. "Honored elders," he began in careful Zephyrian, "I came here not to defend our bond, but to celebrate it." Several elders looked surprised that he could speak their language so well. David continued, 6 months ago, I was a lonely man who cared more about his work than about living. Lyra has taught me what it means to truly connect with another being. But more than that, she has taught me about your people's greatest gift." "And what is that?" Elder Kethvar asked skeptically. "The ability to bring harmony where there was chaos, the ability to heal emotional wounds, the ability to help others find peace." David's voice grew stronger as he spoke. "Lyra didn't lose these abilities when she bonded with me. She strengthened them. She learned to help not just Zephyrians, but humans too. She became a bridge between our peoples." David paused, looking around the circle of elders. "You sent her to me as a reward for building understanding between our civilizations. But the real reward wasn't for me. It was for both our peoples. Through our bond, we've learned that connection doesn't require sameness. It requires understanding, respect, and the willingness to grow." The hall was silent for a long moment. Then Elder Vexai spoke. "Lyra Silthanis, demonstrate your connection to the deep currents." Lyra nodded and closed her eyes. Her skin began to glow brighter, and David felt something change in the air around them. It was subtle at first, but then he realized what was happening. Lyra was harmonizing the emotional currents in the entire chamber. David could feel the elders, skepticism softening, their anger cooling, their curiosity growing, but she wasn't manipulating them. She was simply creating space for their better natures to emerge. When she opened her eyes, her skin was glowing with beautiful patterns of gold and silver. "I sense the deep currents more clearly now than ever," before she said quietly. "Love has not weakened my abilities, it has made them stronger." Elder Kethvar was quiet for a long time. Finally he spoke. Perhaps we have been too narrow in our understanding of harmony." The council deliberated for hours while David and Lyra waited in a crystal garden outside the chambers. David held Lyra's hand, amazed by how calm she seemed. "Whatever they decide," he said, "we'll face it together." "Yes," Lyra agreed. "Together." When the council finally recalled them, Elder Vexai delivered their decision. "The council has decided not to dissolve this bond," he announced. "Instead, we offer you both a new mission. We want you to establish the first joint human Zephyrian settlement on a world that belongs to neither of our peoples." David and Lyra looked at each other in surprise. "It will be an experiment," Vexai continued, "a chance to prove that our peoples can truly work together. You will be pioneers, building something entirely new." As they left the council chambers, David realized this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. They had faced the doubts of both their peoples and emerged stronger. Now they had the chance to build something that belonged completely to them. "Are you ready for another adventure?" David asked Lyra as their ship prepared for departure. Lyra's skin glowed with warm, happy colors. "With you," she said, "I am ready for anything." Outside the ship's windows, stars waited to guide them toward their new future together. 2 years later, David stood on a hill overlooking their new settlement on Kepler 442b, watching the sun set over buildings that looked like nothing else in the galaxy. The structures curved and flowed like Zephyrian architecture, but they were built with human engineering principles. Gardens grew in patterns that pleased both species, and pathways wound between homes where humans and Zephyrians lived side by side. "The evening report," Lyra said, joining him on the hill. She handed him a datapad, but neither of them looked at it immediately. They had developed a habit of watching sunsets together, a daily reminder of how far they had come. "Any problems today?" David asked. Though he could tell from Lyra's calm expression that things had gone well, Dr. Rodriguez's daughter took her first steps today, Lyra said with a smile. And the Zephyrian youngling Silmoth spoke his first human words. The children are adapting faster than their parents. David laughed. Children always do. What did he say? Cookie, Lyra replied, and they both burst into laughter. I believe he learned it from Tommy Chen. No relation to you, despite the name. The settlement had grown from a handful of volunteers to nearly 300 residents. Humans and Zephyrians had come from across the galaxy to be part of this experiment in cooperative living. Some came out of curiosity, others seeking adventure, and many because they believed in what David and Lyra were building. Remember when we thought this was impossible? David asked, wrapping his arm around Lyra's shoulders. Her skin was warm and pulsed with content golden patterns. I remember when you thought marriage to me was impossible, Lyra teased. Now look at us. Their relationship had deepened over the 2 years on Kepler 442b. Living together, working together, building something meaningful together, had transformed their arranged partnership into something beautiful. They had learned each other's languages, customs, and hearts. The supply ship from Earth arrives tomorrow, David said, looking at the data pad. And the Zephyrian transport comes next week. More volunteers? Lyra asked. Better than that. The first group of joint researchers, humans and Zephyrians who specifically want to work together on projects. David's voice filled with excitement. There's a team studying how to combine human medicine with Zephyrian healing techniques. Another group wants to develop new building materials using both our technologies. Lyra's skin brightened with happy colors. And the young ones we requested, coming. On both ships, 12 human students and 8 Zephyrian learners. They want to grow up bilingual and bicultural. This had been Lyra's idea, to bring young people from both species to the settlement, to raise them with understanding of both cultures from childhood. David had been amazed by her vision, but it was working. The children in the settlement switched between languages and customs as easily as changing clothes. They walked back down the hill toward the settlement's community center, a beautiful building that served as the heart of their small town. Tonight was community night, when everyone gathered to share news, celebrate achievements, and solve problems together. The center was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Human families sat next to Zephyrian pods, children played games that mixed elements from both cultures, and teenagers chatted in a hybrid language they had created themselves. David, Lyra, called Dr. Rodriguez, the settlement's chief medical officer. You need to see this. She led them to a corner where her 10-year-old daughter Sophia was playing with Vitara, a young Zephyrian whose family had arrived 6 months ago. The two children were building something with blocks that glowed when touched. Watch this, Dr. Rodriguez whispered. Sophia picked up a blue block and placed it carefully. As she did, Vithara's skin pulsed with the same blue color. Then Vithara selected a golden block, and Sophia's eyes seemed to sparkle with gold flecks. They're sharing emotions through the building process, Lyra whispered in amazement. The child is naturally developing abilities similar to ours, and Vithara is learning human spatial reasoning through the connection, David added. They're teaching each other without even realizing it. Dr. Rodriguez beamed with pride. Sophia told me yesterday that she wants to be a bridge person when she grows up. She says she wants to help different kinds of people understand each other. David felt his eyes getting misty. This was exactly what they had hoped for when they started the settlement, a new generation that would see cooperation between species as natural and normal. The evening's main event was a presentation by the settlement's first graduating class, young adults who had spent 2 years learning from both human and Zephyrian teachers. Tonight they would share their final projects with the community. Rachel Kim, a human engineer, had worked with Zeth Lane, a Zephyrian artist, to create a new kind of solar collection system that was both highly efficient and beautiful to look at. Their design looked like flowing sculpture, but generated 30% more power than traditional panels. Tim Patterson, a human biologist, had partnered with Lyra's cousin, Mirazeth, to develop new food crops that could grow in various atmospheric conditions. Their hybrid plants could feed both human and Zephyrian nutritional needs. But the presentation that moved David most came from the youngest graduate, 19-year-old Amy Foster. She had been born on Europa Station and came to the settlement when she was 17, seeking something she couldn't find in purely human society. "When I arrived here, I felt lost," Amy said, addressing the mixed crowd in fluent Zephyrian and English. "I didn't fit in completely with humans, and I obviously wasn't Zephyrian. But here I learned that fitting in isn't about being exactly like others. It's about finding ways to contribute your unique gifts to something bigger than yourself." Amy had developed a new form of art that combined human storytelling with Zephyrian emotional harmonics. Her pieces could make people feel the emotions of the story while they experienced it, creating a deeper connection between the audience and the narrative. "I want to take this art form to other worlds," Amy continued, "to help people everywhere understand that differences don't have to divide us, they can enrich us." After the presentations, David found himself standing with a group of the original volunteers, humans and Zephyrians who had taken the biggest risk by coming to an unknown world to build something unprecedented. "Do you ever regret it?" asked Chenwei, a human engineer who had given up a comfortable job on Mars to join the settlement. "Regret what?" David replied. "Leaving everything behind. The safety, the certainty, the career advancement." David looked around the room at the mixed families, the children playing together, the teenagers planning their futures in this unique world they were all creating together. "I used to think my old life was about building bridges between cultures," David said. "But I was just translating words. Here we're building actual bridges, real connections. We're proving that cooperation isn't just possible, it's beautiful." Lyra appeared at his side, her skin glowing with warm colors. "The children's choir is about to perform," she said. "You won't want to miss this." The choir was made up of young humans and Zephyrians who had learned to blend their voices with Zephyrian harmonic abilities. When they sang, the music didn't just fill the air. It filled hearts, creating an emotional experience that brought tears to many eyes. As David listened, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. 3 years ago, he had been a lonely man focused only on his work, terrified of the marriage that had been arranged for him. Now he was a husband, a leader, a pioneer, and happier than he had ever imagined possible. "What are you thinking about?" Lyra asked softly. "About how sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never planned for," David replied. "Like us?" "Like us. Like this place. Like the future these children are going to build." The choir finished their song and the audience erupted in applause. Children ran to their parents, teenagers made plans for the next day's activities, and adults discussed tomorrow's work projects. Later that night, David and Lyra walked home under stars that looked different from those of either Earth or the Zephyrian homeworld. Their house was a perfect blend of both architectural styles, comfortable and beautiful. "The council sent another message today," Lyra said as they prepared for bed. "They want to establish 5 more settlements like ours." "And Earth Command?" David asked. "They're finally admitting this experiment is working better than anyone expected. They want to send a delegation to study our methods." David smiled. "Remember when they both thought we were crazy?" "We were crazy," Lyra laughed. "Crazy enough to believe that love could bridge any difference." "And were we right?" Lyra's skin pulsed with the deep gold patterns that David had learned, meant perfect contentment. "Look around us, my husband. What do you think?" Outside their window, the settlement slept peacefully. Human and Zephyrian families rested in homes built with shared dreams. Children who spoke 2 languages and understood 2 ways of thinking prepared for another day of growth and discovery. David had been given an alien wife as a reward for his diplomatic work. But she had become so much more than he ever expected. She had become his partner in building a future where differences were celebrated, where cooperation was natural, and where love really could change the world. As he drifted off to sleep, David smiled, knowing that tomorrow would